Hey guys! Thanks for tuning in. If you made it through the first video, thank you so much for sticking with me and joining here for the second video. So what I'm going to try to do with this video is kind of talk about some of the things that you can do in your Blackboard environment to help set your students up for success with the tool. And so what I mean by that is help them feel more confident using Gradescope from the get-go, which means answering some questions up front, getting them all the information to basically hit the ground running and get started in your class. So it's fewer questions that you're having to answer and less instances of student anxiety, hopefully. So we're going to go over basically three major areas with this video. The first being how to create a really good orientation section in your course that goes over all the information they need to get set up with Gradescope. The second main item is using a consistent naming convention. And the third item is providing multiple access points to get to Gradescope. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with creating that Gradescope orientation material for your class. Okay, so as we get started here, I always like to make sure that any project that I'm helping with, that we have a really good orientation part of the course. So some people call this start here, but for accessibility reasons, I prefer the word orientation because it's more descriptive of the link. So at any rate, that's what I've done here with this demo course, is I've created this orientation page, and then I've got this folder where I've labeled it Gradescope. So in this folder, you'll see all the items that I think are really important to include in your orientation information about Gradescope. So the first thing that we're going to do actually is create a link to Gradescope here in the orientation materials. So let's go ahead and do Gradescope. And again, I'm going to change that link color. And let's see. So I'm going to grab some text that I already wrote about this over here, and I'm happy to share it with anybody else who'd like to add some introductory information about Gradescope to their course. So I always try to do some cleanup work when I'm copying and pasting, and then just change up some of this formatting in here a little bit. So I'll switch this to a heading, make this a heading as well. Sorry, I'm doing some accessibility work here, but I can't not do that when I'm working in here. I would not be practicing good work if I didn't do that. Okay, so now it's added at the bottom, so I'm going to reorder that, right? So we can see it down there, but I want to move it to the top. So, oh, and I should have renamed it. That's okay. Oops. All right. Now we can see my items have been reordered. So the first thing I have up here is just linked to Gradescope. So the very first thing I did was kind of explain to students what Gradescope is. So I said here that this was a homework submission tool that will allow me to provide more timely feedback. Now I know several instructors that would prefer to not actually name what some of these other third-party tools are that they're using in their course. They feel like that's unnecessary information that kind of details the student doesn't need to know. And while I respect that, it really is helpful for us to be upfront with students and explain to them what these course tools are that we are using in the event that they are having any technical difficulties. Because if they don't know that the tool that they're using is Gradescope and they end up calling in for help and they're saying that my assignment won't go through, our technical support folks have a really hard time identifying, is this a problem within Blackboard? Are you using some other tool? Is this a user error? It just adds more time to figuring out the core cause of the problem. So that's why I prefer to define up front. Also, it's really important for the integrity of our class that we tell our students where their student data is being stored. So in this case, we do have student grade information that's being stored in Gradescope. So that's another reason I like to include that. So I also included this section on setting up your account. So I told them to simply follow the link above, this link that I created, and it tells them they'll be directed to a Gradescope page for the course. So that's obviously very important for them to get set up. The next item that we want to go over with them is how to access Gradescope. Now, hopefully they'll find this in several places throughout the course, but it's just always good to let them know up front that they can find this in the course navigation, or you can find it, in any of the learning modules where a Gradescope submission is required. It kind of sets the tone for the class and lets them know what to expect. This next section has to do with submitting their assignments in Gradescope, and everyone's section here is going to be a little bit different depending on how you plan to use Gradescope in your class. So this is just an example that I chose. So if you are having students submit their own work, you've got several options here. You can have the instructor collect all of the work and scan it themselves at the end of class, or you can have students submit their own work. And in this example, that's what I am proposing. So I included some help documents from our Gradescope folks. We've got this great attachment here that I'll show you really quick about submitting homework on Gradescope that talks about the recommended apps both for iOS and Android devices. So that is really helpful. And there's also this video about submitting homework. I also chose to put in bold right here that taking a picture of your submission is not the same as scanning your submission. So we definitely have had some issues with that in the past, where students just take a picture of their work and send that as their submission, and that the aspect ratio isn't correct on all of those. It can really make that more difficult when the instructor is trying to grade based on how they have mapped out a PDF version of their assignment. So I think it's really good to kind of stress that. So if you're also going to go over Gradescope instructions a little bit in your classes, I would highly recommend stressing to your students that a picture is not the same as scanning the submission. So in these instructions, I also just included some other options for scanning, if they don't happen to have a mobile device that allows for scanning. So the next portion that I included here in our orientation, it talks about viewing feedback on Gradescope. So you'll see here that I gave them some instructions. This is straight from Gradescope. I will probably revise it a little bit to say, once your assignment is graded in Gradescope, you will see all grading rubrics highlighted within Gradescope. So that probably needs to be revised to include that feedback is available within Gradescope and not within Blackboard. And so the last piece in the orientation section that is still highly important is the technical support aspect of this. And so the first thing I did was refer to them to some really helpful Gradescope videos and tutorials that they've put together on the Gradescope Help Center. Also give them the Gradescope email, because again, this is a vendor tool that we are paying for. So we are paying for the support that the vendor is offering on this. Now, in the event that a student is not getting a timely response, I also said that they could open a ticket with e-learning. But it's unlikely that e-learning will be as helpful as Gradescope in this instance, since it is a vendor tool, and if students are having an issue, it's likely to be on the vendor side. But just in case, it never hurts to cover our bases. So that covers our orientation material for the class. So another thing that I had mentioned was consistent naming convention for your homework in your class. And so what I mean by that is, if we are going to do our tool link here from this module page, and we're going to go to Gradescope, maybe we want to call this labeling activity, right? And I'm going to choose this color. Right, and I'll say complete this week's assignment using Gradescope. Okay. So now whatever I put here is the name of the assignment. I need to make sure that that is the name of the assignment within Gradescope. And I know that seems really simple, but I see this so often where maybe here we've got it listed as labeling activity, but maybe in Gradescope we just have it called labeling. And so for the most part, students can make that connection, but they're not 100% sure. So I would just say whatever we can do, make that name exactly the same. Gradescope does not allow for deep linking like you may find in some of your other publisher tools. And what I mean by that is that you may have worked with other tools that allow you to link to specific assignments, excuse me, within that other tool, within that third-party tool. And we do not have that with Gradescope. It's just going to link to the main landing page. So we need to make sure that we're using really consistent naming convention to eliminate any uncertainty on the student's part. So the last bit of advice I have is just to provide multiple Gradescope access points in your course. So you can see like, okay, here with this module, I've added the link to Gradescope. I also have the link to Gradescope right here within my navigation. And, I also had it in the orientation section. Maybe I want to add it in other places in the class. Wherever it's relevant to have it, you may want to include it there. And let's say with our tests, when you say test feedback, maybe you'd add a link here. Again, this would be a great place to link to Gradescope and let your students know that feedback is available. You can also do announcements. Once students have initially clicked through to Gradescope, through Blackboard, you can add course announcements that have course links over to Gradescope, and it shouldn't be an issue. If they are prompted to log in, they can just use their same ASU credentials that they use to log into Ramport and Blackboard. But anyway, I just wanted to stress the importance of doing that, of adding those access points to everywhere in your course where it's relevant. So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, if you have any questions about doing any of these things within your class, or you need help with any of that, please let me know, and I am happy to help out.